Hello everyone, my name is Brendan Marr. That noise you're hearing is my ventilator. And welcome to Page Turners They Were Not, my Star Wars podcast. I'm recording this on a Thursday. And I'm continuing our new Thursday tradition in a series I'm calling Cinema and Star Wars. Today's film is easily one of the most accessible films of the golden age of Hollywood. And that is the 1938 film, The Adventures of Robin Hood. Oh, yes. Now, oddly enough, this is the second time we have discussed a film directed by Michael Curtiz. Michael Curtiz also directed Casablanca. The Adventures of Robin Hood was directed by Michael Curtiz and William Kiley, starring, of course, the incomparable Errol Flynn in the title role as Robin Hood. Errol Flynn was one of the biggest box office stars of his time. Romantic leading man and star of many swashbuckling films. The Adventures of Robin Hood is a swashbuckling film that's almost without equal. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to talk about this film in the first half of this podcast episode, and then we're going to take a break. And in the second half of the episode, I will discuss the parallels that I see between this film and Star Wars. The Adventures of Robin Hood is fun. It is one of the most fun films I've ever seen. It is definitely the epitome of golden age of Hollywood. Big stars, sweeping melodrama, great swashbuckling action and adventure, and of course about one of our favorite fictional rogues. In fact, arguably our most favorite fictional rogue. And that, of course, being Robin Hood. Now, let me give you a little bit of background on this film. In the 1830s, Sir Walter Scott, the great Scottish novelist, wrote Ivanhoe. Now, Ivanhoe is a novel that sort of cemented much of our modern legends about Robin Hood. Now, even though Sir Walter Scott was not the first to set Robin Hood in the 1190s, Ivanhoe is the novel that made that concept popular. And of course, we all know the story. In 1193, King Richard the Lionheart, returning home from the Crusades, is captured by the Emperor of Austria. Richard's treacherous brother, Prince John, takes power, and it's up to Robin Hood and the loyal followers of King Richard to pay the ransom to get the rightful king back in England. And that, of course, is our common idea of Robin Hood. Or, as he is called in this film, Sir Robin of Locksley. A title borrowed from the novel Ivanhoe as well. Um, so it was Sir Walter Scott's novel that firmly cemented the popular idea of when and where the stories of Robin Hood take place. And of course, we know the rest. We know Sherwood Forest. We know Little John and Friar Tuck. And many of the other characters. Now, The Adventures of Robin Hood takes a lot of the cues from the novel Ivanhoe. But what the novel Ivanhoe did for the 19th century, The Adventures of Robin Hood has done for the 20th century, in terms of defining our view of Robin Hood. And of course, Errol Flynn plays Robin with much relish. By the way, this movie has a great cast. We have, of course, Errol Flynn as Robin Hood, Olivia de Havilland as Maid Marian, and by the way, Miss de Havilland is still alive. You betcha, Dame Olivia de Havilland, as I should give her a proper title, is 103 years old. And within a couple of months, she'll be 104. She, of course, plays Maid Marian. You have the great Basil Rathbone as Guy of Gisborne. Now, it's very interesting to note that in this version, while the Sheriff of Nottingham is one of the antagonists, he is not the primary antagonist. In this film, it's Sir Guy of Gisborne, played by Claude Rains. Oh, I'm sorry, Basil Rathbone. Speaking of Claude Rains plays Prince John. Now, Claude Rains was also in Casablanca. Another Casablanca connection. That's 2 in 1 movie. Claude Rains, who played Louis in Casablanca, the somewhat shifty French officer, plays Prince John in this film. Claude Rains seemed to make quite a career of playing people with questionable or no morals. And of course, we know from the popularity of the Robin Hood legend that Prince John is the bad guy who usurped his brother's throne. Now, of course, Prince John has a pretty bad historical reputation. How much of that is justified? Well, I do know that they call him John Lackland. Literally, lack land. Because the empire that his father built pretty much fell apart under John when John became king. So John has a pretty bad historical reputation, both from history and from the popular culture of the Robin Hood story. Another bit of detail I want to discuss is the score. The original musical score to The Adventures of Robin Hood is breathtaking. It's brilliant, it's fun, it's energetic. Composed by the great Eric Wolfgang Korngold. Now, I had mentioned Korngold on the podcast before as being a huge inspiration on our very own John Williams. In fact, the score to Star Wars is based very much, or at least the opening theme is, to the opening theme of Korngold's score for the movie King's Row, starring Ronald Reagan, if you can believe that. Now, getting back to the Adventures of Robin Hood, the score really serves to make the movie. I mean, the movie's already great, but like any good score, it adds to the mix. The score is very big, very bold, very much in keeping with the movie. As I said, the movie is very, high melodrama. Great sword fights, great bombastic acting. Even though this movie is in 1938, it's in color. And let me tell you, saturated Technicolor, we will call it, which is brilliant. Visually, it's a very stunning film. So it's a great film on so many levels. It's so much fun. It really is just an epic in every sense of the word. Now, let me talk about the awards really quick. It won 3 Academy Awards, which included Best Art Direction, Best Film Editing, and Best Original Score. Right, go figure. It was nominated for Best Picture, to be clear. This version of Robin Hood, played by Errol Flynn, is number 18 on the AFI's list of the greatest movie heroes. And I say rightly so. Robin Hood is the epitome of the lovable rogue. Now, I'll talk about that in a minute to some of the parallels with Star Wars. But the concept of the lovable rogue as an archetype is a very old one. Now, Robin is a very principled man, if you consider it. The fact that he's willing to do anything to put the rightful king back on the throne. By the way, the score to this movie is ranked number 11 on the AFI's top scores, movie scores. Now, furthermore, if you're planning on watching this movie, there is a cartoon that I might recommend showing before it. If you can find the Bugs Bunny cartoon Rabbit Hood, that goes very well with this film. In fact, it even directly references this movie. Rabbit Hood is about Bugs Bunny being at odds with the Sheriff of Nottingham. It's actually one of my favorite cartoons ever. So if you're going to do a movie night with the Adventures of Robin Hood, then make it a bit like an old theater experience by watching a cartoon, in this case, Rabbit Hood, before you watch this movie. By the way, the chemistry between Errol Flynn and Olivia de Havilland is electric. And there's a reason that they appeared, get this, as in 9 films together. Though one of these they had no scenes together. But they paired together in movies like Captain Blood, The Charge of the Light Brigade, The Private Lives of Elizabeth and Essex. Which, by the way, The Private Lives, I should say. The Private Lives of Elizabeth and Essex is a pretty good movie. With Errol Flynn playing Queen Elizabeth I's much younger lover. So what more can I say about The Adventures of Robin Hood? It is truly one of the best films ever made, I think, in terms of that swashbuckling genre. And the influence that this movie has had on our modern view of Robin Hood is astonishing in terms of how much an effect it has had on the 20th century and the 21st century's view of Robin Hood. And Robin Hood arguably is one of the most popular and best known fictional characters in existence. So if you have not seen this movie, by all means, check it out. It is absolutely worth the watch. And it's a movie for all ages. I saw this movie when I was very young. Probably 7 or 8, and it stayed with me, and I've watched it many times since. So it's a family film for all ages that's worth the watch. And one of the most influential, and I'd say just fun movies of all time. Okay, we are going to take a short break, and I will be back to talk about the parallels with Star Wars. Be seeing you in just a moment. Hello there, this is Brennan Marr, host of Page Turners They Were Not, a Star Wars podcast. And I'm here to tell you about Anchor. Anchor is the best way to make a podcast. Why is that? Well, first off, it's free. Yes, you heard me right. Anchor is free. Anchor has all the tools you need to make a podcast from your phone or your computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you on various platforms, including Spotify and Apple Podcasts. You can make money from your podcast. And get this, with no minimum listenership. That means you can make money even if no one listens to your podcast. That, of course, is not ideal, as Anchor will allow you to spread your podcast, bring in more viewers, and you can make more money because of it. Everything you need to make a podcast is in one place on Anchor. If you're interested, download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Thank you, and may the Force be with you. Okay, we are back. So let's talk really quick about the parallels that I see between this film, The Adventures of Robin Hood, and Star Wars. Well, the one that comes to mind first is the character of Robin Hood himself, the lovable rogue. The lovable rogue, in my mind, is very similar to Han Solo. There is a difference, however, in that Robin is a very principled man who has a clear goal in mind to put the rightful king back on the throne. Han Solo, at least when we first meet him, is more like Rick Blaine in Casablanca. You know, the I stick my neck out for nobody kind of guy. Or as Han puts it, I look out for just one person, me. You know, that's how he starts. So he's a little bit different than Robin Hood. But as we know, as the character of Han evolves, we see the good guy. And so, in a sense, he is that lovable rogue, that archetype that Robin Hood is. Also, that comes to mind is that this film is a swashbuckler. A swashbuckler with lots of great sword fights, lots of great action. That's definitely Star Wars. Star Wars is designed to be in sort of that tradition of swashbucklers and kind of high melodrama also. The concept of the space opera, which Star Wars is the idea of a movie set in space that has kind of that melodramatic, larger-than-life swashbuckling feel. That's very much in keeping with kind of the tone of the Robin Hood films. And generally, though there are darker interpretations, such as Ridley Scott's version of Robin Hood. But in the traditional sense, the Robin Hood stories are very operatic, meaning that the emotions are heightened. The reason that Star Wars is called a space opera, or rather, the concept of the space opera is called that because it's operatic. Now, I happen to be a fan of opera. Opera is very high drama, very big melodrama. Everything is very big. The emotions are very heightened. The stakes are very high. Everything is larger than life. That is what a space opera is. And like a space opera, The Adventures of Robin Hood has that very high drama. Everything is larger than life. And definitely the idea of a rebel fighting to put the rightful government back in power. Well, that's Star Wars in a nutshell. The rebels are trying to restore the Republic and take it away from the tyrannical emperor. Just as Robin Hood is attempting to take the power away from the tyrannical Prince John and Prince John's henchmen, Sir Guy of Gisborne and the Sheriff of Nottingham. The rebels are very much kind of like Robin Hood and his merry men. Even, you could almost argue down to the color palette. Like in Return of the Jedi, the rebels are wearing those green fatigues. Now, obviously, I don't think this is intentional. But to me, it just makes me imagine the merry men in their green garb. So I definitely see some parallels there. The music also. Korngold's score is very much in the tradition of Star Wars. In that, in keeping with its operatic nature, the score is very larger than life, too. Big emotions. Of course, in keeping with a lot of Golden Age of Hollywood scores, it's got, lots of strings, lots of violins, Lots of, this scene is romantic. We're gonna, hit you on the head with how romantic it is by using the string section to go crazy. Or here's a dramatic moment. Oh my, That is very much in keeping with Star Wars' approach to music as well. And I think it's pretty clear that John Williams is a composer in the tradition of Eric Korngold. Now, as with most of the movies where we've been discussing, whether it was intended by George Lucas to be inspirational or not, I think that for me, it's more about what I see, as opposed to what was intended. But I imagine that the stories of Robin Hood were in George Lucas's mind as he created Star Wars. I'm sure he would have grown up with this film. I'm sure that the Robin Hood legends were something that interested him. And I imagine that those were kind of absorbed into his subconscious. But it's parallels that I see, whether it was intentional, or even if the subconscious aspects of the Robin Hood legends played no part in the creation of Star Wars. For me personally, as a viewer, I see some of the connections. And they're definitely in the same tradition of movies as swashbuckling adventures. So if you have not seen The Adventures of Robin Hood, directed by Michael Curtiz and starring Errol Flynn, do yourself a favor and check it out. It is worth the watch. Now next week we're going to start getting into some of the more direct inspirations for Star Wars. But this week I thought I would give you what I believe is one of the most accessible movies of the golden age of Hollywood, in The Adventures of Robin Hood. So those are my thoughts on the matter. Let me know what you think. My name is Brendan Marr. That noise you're hearing is my ventilator. And thank you for tuning in to Page Turners They Were Not, my Star Wars podcast. May the Force be with you.